This table is reserved for our party. You need to move.
I have a reservation. The hostess seated me here 10 minutes ago.
We booked this specific table weeks in advance. This is unacceptable.
Maybe you should speak to the staff because I'm not moving.
Don't you dare speak to me like that. Don't forget where you stand.
It was 7:30 on a Saturday evening at Bella Vista, an upscale Italian restaurant on the waterfront, and what should have been a peaceful dinner for a pediatric surgeon was about to turn into a viral catastrophe. The restaurant was unusually quiet that night, with only a handful of tables occupied during what should have been prime dinner hours. In just 2 minutes, two entitled women's racist meltdown over a restaurant table would be captured on the restaurant's security cameras, spreading across the internet with devastating speed and destroying both their careers. What they said to an innocent doctor just trying to eat dinner alone was so shockingly racist that the few diners present sat frozen in stunned silence, and the CCTV footage would ensure they faced consequences that would haunt them for years. This wasn't just another Karen moment. This was career-ending, life-altering, permanent digital record-level racism caught in crystal clear 4K on security cameras. Before we get into this wild story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button because you definitely don't want to miss how this plays out. Trust me, the ending is absolutely worth it. The woman at the center of this disaster was named Jasmine Carter, a 35-year-old marketing executive who had moved to the city 18 months earlier for a promotion. She was celebrating her birthday at Bella Vista, a restaurant she'd visited twice before and deemed appropriately sophisticated for her special day. Jasmine had made a reservation for 2 people 3 weeks in advance, specifically requesting table 14, a prime spot near the window with a perfect view of the harbor and the city lights reflecting on the water. Jasmine was the kind of person who took pride in planning perfect events, who documented everything on social media, who expected things to go exactly as she envisioned them. She arrived at the restaurant dressed in an expensive cocktail dress, her designer handbag prominently displayed, her expectations set impossibly high. With her was her friend Ashley Morgan, a 41-year-old financial advisor who shared Jasmine's sense of entitlement and love for the spotlight. Both women were dressed to impress, ready to celebrate and take photos that would look perfect on Instagram. But when the hostess led them to their table, Jasmine stopped dead in her tracks. Someone was already sitting at table 14. Her name was Simone Jackson, a 38-year-old pediatric surgeon who had just finished a grueling 72-hour shift at Children's Hospital. She had come to Bella Vista alone, treating herself to a nice dinner as a reward for getting through one of the most challenging weeks of her career. She had made a reservation for 1 person at 7:15, and the hostess had seated her at table 14, a small table that was perfect for solo dining, but could be expanded for larger parties. Simone was exhausted but content, sipping a glass of wine and reading through a medical journal on her tablet while she waited for her appetizer. She had specifically chosen this restaurant because it was quiet enough to relax in but nice enough to feel special. She deserved this moment of peace after the week she'd had, after the lives she'd saved, after the family she'd comforted. She had no idea her peaceful evening was about to become a viral nightmare. Jasmine walked directly to table 14, Ashley following close behind. The 2 women stood next to the table, staring down at Simone with expressions that made it clear they believed there had been some kind of terrible mistake. Simone looked up from her tablet, confused by the 2 women hovering over her table. She smiled politely, the way you do when you're not sure if someone needs something. That's when Jasmine told her the table was reserved for their party and she needed to move. Simone's smile faded. She set down her wine glass carefully and explained that she had a reservation and the hostess had seated her at this table. Her voice was calm and professional, the tone of someone used to staying composed in high-pressure situations. But Jasmine wasn't interested in calm explanations. Ashley stepped forward and said they had booked this specific table weeks in advance. She said it like it was the most important thing in the world, like their birthday celebration couldn't possibly happen at any other table in the restaurant. Simone kept her composure. She suggested they speak to the staff about the confusion because she wasn't doing anything wrong by sitting at the table where she'd been seated. Her voice remained level, reasonable, the tone of someone trying to de-escalate an unnecessary confrontation. That's when Jasmine's voice got sharp. She told Simone not to speak to her like that, and then she said it, the words that would seal her fate. She told Simone that people like her always forget their place. The phrase hung in the air like poison, dripping with condescension and unmistakable racism, carrying through the quiet restaurant and causing other diners to freeze mid-bite and look up from their meals. The security cameras positioned throughout the dining room captured every word, every gesture, every moment of what was unfolding. Someone at the bar stood up, looking alarmed. A server paused mid-step. The entire atmosphere of the restaurant had shifted from pleasant dining to collective horror at what they'd just witnessed. Have you ever been blamed for someone else's mistake? Let me know in the comments. At a nearby table, a couple was celebrating their 10th wedding anniversary. The husband, Michael Torres, a 42-year-old high school teacher, noticed the confrontation starting and watched with growing concern. His wife Jennifer sat beside him, equally disturbed by what they were hearing. The entire interaction was being captured by the restaurant's security cameras mounted discreetly throughout the dining room, recording everything in high definition from multiple angles. The restaurant manager, Anthony Ricci, who had been running Bella Vista for 15 years, came hurrying over. He was a professional who prided himself on handling any situation with grace and diplomacy. He approached the table with a welcoming smile, asking how he could help resolve the situation. Jasmine immediately launched into her complaint. She explained that she had made a reservation for table 14 specifically, that it was her birthday, that this was unacceptable service, and that this woman needed to be moved to another table immediately so they could have the spot they'd reserved. Ashley nodded vigorously, adding that they had been planning this evening for weeks. Anthony listened patiently, then asked to see Jasmine's reservation. She pulled it up on her phone, showing him the confirmation email that clearly stated, "Party of 2, 7:30 p.m., table request noted." Anthony nodded, then turned to Simone. He asked gently if she had a reservation as well. Simone showed him her confirmation, which read, "Party of 1, 7:15 p.m., table 14. Anthony's expression shifted as he understood the problem. He explained to Jasmine and Ashley that while they had requested table 14, it was noted as a preference, not a guarantee. The restaurant had seated a single diner there at 7:15 for a one-person reservation, which was standard practice. He said he had several other beautiful tables available near the window, including table 16, which was actually larger and had an even better view. This should have been the end of it. A simple misunderstanding, an offered solution, everyone moves on with their evening. But Jasmine wasn't interested in solutions. Her face flushed with anger. She said that wasn't acceptable, that they had requested this specific table, that she had been planning this evening for weeks, and that it was completely unprofessional to give away their table to someone else. The way she said someone else had a weight to it that made everyone within earshot uncomfortable. Ashley joined in, her voice getting louder. She started talking about how much money they planned to spend at the restaurant, how they were regular customers, they'd been there twice, and how this kind of service was unacceptable at an establishment of this caliber. Both women were creating a scene now, their voices carrying through the quiet restaurant. Anthony remained professional, explaining again that table 16 was available and actually preferable. He offered to have his staff move table settings immediately and even offered a complimentary bottle of wine for the inconvenience. Simone sat quietly through all of this, her hands folded on the table, watching this scene unfold around her. She hadn't asked for any of this. She had done nothing wrong. But she was clearly the problem in their minds, the obstacle preventing a perfect birthday celebration. Jasmine turned her attention back to Simone. She told her that the right thing to do would be to move to another table voluntarily, to show some courtesy and consideration. She said it like Simone was being selfish by simply sitting at the table where the restaurant had seated her. Simone took a deep breath. She spoke directly to Anthony, not to Jasmine or Ashley, and said she was perfectly happy at her current table, that she had been seated here by the hostess, and that she saw no reason to move when she had done nothing wrong. Her voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath it now. That's when both women lost whatever control they had left. Jasmine started talking about how people needed to learn respect, how some people thought they could just take what they wanted, how she was tired of dealing with this kind of behavior. Ashley nodded along, adding her own commentary about certain people not understanding boundaries. And then, in front of Anthony, in front of the handful of diners scattered throughout the restaurant, Jasmine said something that made everyone go silent. She told Simone that maybe if she spent less time trying to eat at restaurants she couldn't afford and more time at places more appropriate for her, there wouldn't be these kinds of problems. Ashley laughed and said, "Exactly. People like her need to know their place." The entire restaurant seemed to freeze. Someone gasped. A fork clattered onto a plate. The few diners present stared in shock, unable to believe what they just heard. Simone's hands tightened on the table edge, her knuckles going white, but her face remained composed. This was a woman who had spent years dealing with racism in medical school, in hospitals, in her professional life, who had developed the armor needed to survive, in spaces where people questioned whether she belonged. She looked directly at both women and said quietly, "That was racist," and everyone heard it. Both Jasmine and Ashley's faces went pale, then red, then pale again. You could literally see the moment they realized what they'd said out loud, in public, with security cameras recording, but instead of backing down or apologizing, Jasmine doubled down. She said she wasn't racist, she was just being honest, and that Simone was being oversensitive. Ashley quickly agreed, saying they were just trying to celebrate a birthday and being treated terribly. Anthony's professional composure finally cracked. His voice was firm when he told both women that he needed them to leave the restaurant immediately. He said their behavior was unacceptable, their comments were inappropriate, and they were no longer welcome at Bella Vista. Both women's mouths fell open. They couldn't believe they were being asked to leave. Jasmine started sputtering about how she was the customer, how she had a reservation, how she was being discriminated against. Ashley tried to play the victim too, saying this was unfair treatment, that they were being ganged up on. The irony was completely lost on them both. Anthony was already pulling out his phone, calling the police for a trespass warning. Both women's voices got louder, creating an even bigger scene. They pointed at Simone and said this was all her fault, that she had ruined everything, that she should be ashamed of herself. They fed off each other's energy, each making the situation worse. Do you think Jasmine and Ashley understood how badly they'd messed up, or were they too entitled to see it? Type your thoughts below. The restaurant security system had captured all of it. Multiple cameras positioned throughout the dining room recorded both women's racist comments in crystal clear high definition, their refusal to leave, Anthony's professional handling of the situation, and Simone sitting quietly at her table with tears streaming down her face, trying to maintain her dignity while being publicly humiliated by two grown women. Every word, every facial expression, every moment was preserved on the restaurant's CCTV system. The police arrived within 8 minutes. 2 officers, both with body cameras recording, entered the restaurant and immediately assessed the situation. Anthony met them and explained what had happened, showing them Simone's reservation confirmation and explaining that both women had made racist remarks and were refusing to leave after being asked. The officers approached Jasmine and Ashley, who immediately tried to paint themselves as the victims. They said they had been discriminated against, that the restaurant had given away their table, that they were being unfairly targeted. They talked over each other, each trying to tell their version first, making the situation more chaotic. One of the officers, a woman named Officer Chen, asked if there was any video footage of the incident. Anthony immediately explained that the entire interaction had been recorded by the restaurant's security cameras. He pulled up the footage on his office computer and the officers reviewed it right there. Officer Chen's expression remained neutral, professional, but when she looked back at both women, something had shifted. She asked them directly why they had made those comments about Simone. She asked why they had refused to move to another table. She asked why they were refusing to leave after being asked by management. Neither woman had good answers. Jasmine tried to claim the footage was taken out of context. Ashley said they never said what everyone clearly heard them say. Both insisted people were ganging up on them, but there were multiple camera angles, witness accounts, too much evidence. The officers explained that they were both being issued trespass warnings and needed to leave immediately. If either of them returned, they would be arrested. Jasmine started crying then, which seemed like a calculated move more than genuine emotion. She kept saying this wasn't fair, that it was her birthday, that she hadn't done anything wrong. Ashley was quieter but equally defiant, crossing her arms and muttering about getting lawyers involved. But fair was Simone sitting at a table where she'd been seated, being told she didn't belong. Fair was having security footage document the truth when someone showed their true character. Fair was facing consequences for racist behavior. The officers escorted both women out of the restaurant. The walk to the door seemed to take forever, the handful of diners present watching them leave. It was a level of public humiliation neither had ever experienced, and you could see them both shrinking with every step. Outside the restaurant, as the officers completed the trespass warning paperwork, both women kept insisting they had done nothing wrong. Jasmine said Simone had been rude first. Ashley said they were just standing up for themselves. They claimed this was all blown out of proportion. The body camera footage captured all of it, preserving their attempts to rewrite what had happened. Back inside, Anthony approached Simone's table. He apologized profusely for what had happened, explaining that behavior like that was absolutely not tolerated at Bella Vista. He told her dinner was completely on the house, that he was horrified by what she'd experienced, and that she would always be welcome at the restaurant. Simone wiped her tears, took a shaky breath, and thanked him. But you could see the exhaustion in her eyes. the weight of carrying this burden in public, the frustration of having a peaceful evening destroyed by someone else's racism. She asked Anthony if it would be okay if she left, saying she wasn't sure she could enjoy her meal now. Anthony understood completely, but he asked if she would stay for just a few more minutes. He went to the kitchen and returned with the head chef, Maria, who had worked at Bella Vista since it opened. Maria sat down at Simone's table, and for the next 20 minutes, they talked. Maria shared her own experiences with discrimination. Anthony talked about how they would be using this incident for staff training, and slowly, Simone began to relax. She decided to stay and have her meal after all. And as word spread through the restaurant about what had happened and who Simone was, a pediatric surgeon who saved children's lives, other diners began stopping by her table. They apologized on behalf of humanity. They thanked her for her work. They told her she deserved better. One couple paid for her meal before Anthony could comp it. Another sent over dessert. By the end of the evening, Simone had gone from being publicly humiliated to being surrounded by support, but the trauma of the incident still lingered. The security footage from that evening would soon make its way online. A concerned staff member who witnessed the incident shared it with local news, and from there it spread like wildfire. By the next morning, the crystal clear CCTV footage showing both women's racist meltdown had been picked up by multiple news outlets and shared across social media platforms. The video exploded. Within 3 hours, it had 100,000 views. By morning, it was at 2 million. By Sunday afternoon, it had been shared across every major social media platform, viewed over 15 million times, and picked up by local and national news outlets. The comments section was brutal. People were outraged at both women's behavior, their blatant racism, their complete lack of self-awareness. The security footage was so clear, their words so undeniable, that even the usual both sides crowd couldn't find a way to defend them. News outlets identified Simone and requested interviews. She agreed to speak with one local station where she talked about the incident with the same grace and professionalism she'd shown throughout. She explained that this kind of thing happened more often than people realized, that Black professionals constantly face assumptions about whether they belong in certain spaces, and that she hoped the video would make people more aware of everyday racism. The reporters also tried to interview both women, camping outside their respective homes. Both refused to comment, hiding behind sunglasses and hurrying to their cars whenever cameras appeared. Jasmine posted a long statement on social media that made everything worse. Ashley stayed silent initially, but her social media accounts were quickly discovered and scrutinized. In her post, Jasmine claimed she was the victim of a mob mentality, that her words had been taken out of context, and that she was being unfairly vilified for simply trying to enjoy her birthday. She said nothing about the racist things she'd said. She offered no real apology. She positioned herself as someone being persecuted by cancel culture. Ashley's old social media posts began circulating, revealing problematic views that made her participation in the incident seem less surprising. The internet tore their statements apart within minutes. People posted side-by-side comparisons of what they claimed happened versus what the security footage clearly showed from multiple camera angles. The backlash intensified. Then the internet detectives went to work. Within hours, people had identified both women's employers from their LinkedIn profiles. Jasmine was a senior marketing director for a national retail chain called TrendStyle. Ashley was a financial advisor at a wealth management firm called Preston & Associates. Both companies' social media accounts were immediately flooded with comments, emails, and messages demanding they address their employees' racist behavior. By Monday morning, both TrendStyle and Preston & Associates were in full crisis mode. Jasmine's behavior was completely antithetical to TrendStyle's public messaging about diversity and inclusion. Ashley's comments were equally devastating for a firm that managed money for clients of all backgrounds. By Monday afternoon, TrendStyle released a statement. "We have reviewed the video circulating on social media showing an incident involving one of our employees. The behavior and comments displayed are completely inconsistent with our company values and our commitment to respect and dignity for all people. Jasmine Carter is no longer employed by TrendStyle, effective immediately." Preston & Associates followed within hours with their own statement. "Ashley Morgan's behavior as captured on video does not reflect our firm's values or commitment to treating all people with dignity. She has been terminated, effective immediately." The dual firings made national news. Employment lawyers debated whether they were justified. Social media largely supported the decisions. with many people saying that actions have consequences and companies shouldn't employ people who publicly espouse racist views. But their employment wasn't the only thing at risk. Several acquaintances who knew both women posted their own statements on social media, distancing themselves from the behavior and expressing shock. The two women lost not just their jobs, but their social circles as well. The restaurant Bella Vista received overwhelming support. Their reservations doubled. People were calling specifically to book tables because they'd seen how the management handled the situation. Anthony gave interviews praising his staff and reiterating that everyone deserves to be treated with respect in his restaurant. The security footage became something of an advertisement for doing the right thing, showing how one business stood up against racism even when it might have been easier to just move Simone to another table and avoid the confrontation. Local civil rights organizations reached out to Simone, offering support and asking if she wanted to pursue any legal action. After consulting with lawyers, Simone decided to file a civil lawsuit against both Jasmine and Ashley for intentional infliction of emotional distress, defamation, and violation of her civil rights in a place of public accommodation. The civil case took 8 months to resolve. Both women tried to fight it, claiming they hadn't actually done anything illegal, that their comments weren't racist, that this was all an overreaction. But their lawyers eventually convinced them that going to trial would mean having the security footage played in court, analyzed by experts, and covered extensively by media. The case settled out of court for an undisclosed amount, though sources close to the case suggested the combined settlement was in the six-figure range. The settlement required both women to issue public apologies and complete a certified anti-racism training program. Their apologies, when they finally came, were more genuine than their initial social media responses, though many people questioned whether they reflected true understanding or just legal obligation. The emotional impact on Simone was significant. She gave several interviews about the psychological toll of the incident, explaining that being publicly humiliated and racially attacked in what should have been a safe, enjoyable environment had been traumatic. She talked about the anxiety she now felt entering restaurants, the hyper-awareness of whether she belonged, the exhaustion of constantly navigating racism while also saving lives as a surgeon. But she also used her platform for good. She partnered with several organizations to create training materials for restaurant staff on recognizing and preventing discrimination. She spoke at conferences about implicit bias in service industries. She started a scholarship fund for Black students pursuing careers in medicine, funded partly by her settlement money. The security footage of the incident became a standard example in diversity training programs across the hospitality industry. Restaurant associations used it to teach managers and staff about proper responses to discrimination complaints. Business schools used it as a case study in crisis management and values-based decision-making. Michael Torres, the high school teacher who had been celebrating his anniversary that evening, later gave interviews about witnessing the incident. He talked about the importance of speaking up when you see injustice, even if you're not the one being targeted. He incorporated discussions about bystander responsibility into his civics classes, using what happened at Bella Vista as a teaching moment about standing up against racism. Bella Vista created the Simone Jackson Award, given annually to a healthcare worker in the community, including a $5,000 donation to a charity of their choice and a year of complimentary dining at the restaurant. It was a way of honoring Simone and ensuring that something positive came from something so ugly. 3 years after the incident, a local news station did a follow-up story. Simone was still working as a pediatric surgeon, still saving lives, still making a difference. She had processed the trauma with therapy and support, and while she said she would never forget that evening, it no longer defined her. She continued her advocacy work and had become a respected voice on issues of racism in professional spaces. Both Jasmine and Ashley had moved to different states, working in lower-level positions in their respective fields. Their digital footprints from that night followed them everywhere, making it nearly impossible to rebuild their careers at the levels they'd once achieved. Acquaintances from that evening said both remained bitter about the consequences, never fully accepting responsibility for their actions. The restaurant continued to thrive, known not just for excellent Italian food, but also for its commitment to treating every guest with dignity and respect. Anthony Ricci retired after 40 years in the restaurant industry, and his final interview included a reflection on that night, saying it was one of the moments he was most proud of in his career, standing up for what was right, even when it would have been easier to just move someone to another table. The story of what happened at Bella Vista that Saturday evening is ultimately about dignity and accountability. It's about how quickly a simple situation can become a defining moment. It's about how racism often hides behind seemingly reasonable requests until it doesn't, until it bursts out in public where security cameras can see it. And it's about how, in an age where CCTV systems are everywhere, your true character can be exposed, recorded, and shared with millions. Jasmine and Ashley walked into that restaurant thinking their birthday celebration was more important than someone else's right to peacefully enjoy their dinner. They thought their request for a specific table justified confronting and demeaning another person. They thought their status and expectations entitled them to tell Simone she needed to know her place. They were catastrophically wrong. Their brief moments of racist entitlement cost them their careers, their reputations, their friendships, and significant portions of their financial security. The security footage of their behavior became a permanent record that will follow them forever, showing up every time someone searches their names, reminding the world of who they were at their worst. Simone deserved a quiet evening after a hard week of saving children's lives. She deserved to sit at the table where the restaurant seated her without being questioned, confronted, or told to remember her place. She deserved basic human dignity and respect. The fact that she had to defend those things, that she had to endure public humiliation and trauma, shows the work we still need to do. But Jasmine's and Ashley's firings, the settlement, the permanent damage to their reputations, and the widespread support for Simone show that accountability is real, that businesses can choose to do the right thing, that security systems can document injustice, that consequences exist for public displays of racism. So what do you think? Did Jasmine and Ashley deserve what happened to them, or were the consequences too harsh? Have you ever witnessed something like this at a restaurant? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, make sure you share it. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, because stories like Simone's need to be heard, and people like Jasmine and Ashley need to know that security cameras are everywhere. Everything is being recorded, and accountability is real. In the end, Simone just wanted to eat dinner, that's all. And she deserved to do that without being told she didn't belong, without being told to know her place, without having her peaceful evening destroyed by someone else's entitlement and racism. The fact that standing up for that basic right requires security footage, police, lawsuits, and national attention shows how much further we need to go. But every time someone sees that security footage, every time a restaurant staff member remembers how Bella Vista handled it, every time someone thinks twice before making assumptions about whether someone belongs, that's progress. That's the power of accountability. That's why these stories matter. See you in the next one.